A major mystery is about to unfold in the upcoming episodes of Coronation Street. What led to Gary Windass being found unconscious in a hospital bed after seemingly disappearing without a trace? And why does the woman at his bedside insist that his name is Chesney? Could Gary's strange situation be linked to the night of Aadi's party, when Nina and Summer were convinced they'd stumbled across a corpse? Maria has been overwhelmed with anxiety, having had no contact from Gary since he stormed off to clear his head following a string of heated clashes. Most of their tension revolved around Lou Michaelis. Maria was livid that Gary appeared to be prioritizing time with Lou, the widow of the man responsible for Craig Tinker's death. She questioned Lou's intentions, believing she was taking advantage of Gary's generous nature. The more Maria voiced her concerns, the more Gary resisted. Since his departure, Maria has barely heard a word from him. When Gary fails to reach out on Liam's birthday, her fears intensify and she reports him missing. Nina overhears Maria mentioning that no activity has occurred on Gary's bank account since June 23rd, the same night as the party. She shares the information with Summer and becomes anxious, wondering if Gary was the figure they saw while under the influence that evening. Summer reminds her that there were no assault reports filed, and when they returned to the spot, there was no evidence of Gary or anyone else. Meanwhile, Gary lies unconscious in a hospital bed. A nurse reassures the woman watching over him that Chesney is beginning to recover. Later, when DC Kit Green gets in touch with the hospital to follow up on the unidentified man in a coma, a staff member informs him that the patient is listed under the name Chesney. Believing that rules Gary out, Kit updates Maria and assures her that the search efforts are ongoing. Viewers will then be taken back in time through a series of flashbacks, revealing the truth of what happened on that mysterious night. Was it really Gary that Nina and Summer glimpsed? And how involved were they in what unfolded? And finally, who is the unknown woman keeping watch over Gary in hospital? And why does she continue to insist he's called Chesney? Coronation Street's Gareth Pierce reveals Todd's worrying future as Theo drama spirals. Gareth Pierce has portrayed the mischievous Todd Grimshaw since 2020. When the Coronation Street character made his comeback, he was determined to drive a wedge between Billy Mayhew and Paul Foreman. His manipulative scheme was layered and highlighted personality flaws that made it clear Todd wasn't exactly guided by a strong moral code. The storyline built to an intense climax, leaving Todd alienated from Billy, Summer Spellman, and Eileen Grimshaw because of the extent he went to. Safe to say this marked the last time Todd truly occupied center stage in a major plotline. During the height of the pandemic, there was a phase where Todd and Billy slowly began to rebuild their bond. He also found himself caught up in some drama at the funeral home, working alongside his friend and co-worker, George Shuttleworth. As a devoted fan of the character, I found his reduced presence on screen during this time quite disappointing. In 2022, I voiced my frustration that, shortly after his explosive arc with Billy and Paul, Todd had been pushed aside. It genuinely felt like the show was overlooking a great opportunity to delve into his mental health and the emotional consequences of his actions. But now time has moved on, and so has Todd's story. I recently caught up with actor Gareth Pierce to reflect on Todd's development in Weatherfield since stepping into the role. We discussed Todd's many complexities and how the character has evolved, starting with his return 5 years ago. At the beginning, the focus was really on establishing the recast, Gareth explained. But what made it more difficult was that viewers saw Todd at one of his lowest points, coming back bitter, overwhelmed with guilt over how he'd abandoned Billy and Summer, and determined to split Billy from Paul. That first year and a half was extremely full-on, he continued. And although Todd wasn't central to the M&D storyline, I think it ultimately worked in his favor. It allowed for some tender moments and even the development of an unexpected bond between him and Paul, something no one would have predicted based on their rocky start. A major turning point came earlier this year when Todd's new storyline began to unfold. He crossed paths with a builder named Theo, portrayed by James Cartwright, and things quickly took a dramatic turn. We've since learned that Theo is a deeply layered character, shaped by a troubled past. He had been living with his wife Danielle and their children for years, without her ever knowing he was gay. The show then peeled back the layers of his history, revealing that Theo had undergone traumatic conversion therapy. He frequently lashes out in confusion and frustration, burdened by unresolved pain, and Todd is trying to support him through it. "I think we're seeing a more grown-up version of Todd now," Gareth said. "Losing someone close like Paul made him reflect and mature. He wants to show he's changed. But not that long ago, he still came off as a man-child. There's probably a creeping sense within him that this situation may be too overwhelming, but rather than shifting blame, he's grown enough to look inward and make an effort." This week, Theo's jealousy flared up after walking in on a tense moment between Todd and James Bailey. Although James made a move and Todd turned him down, Theo saw just enough to draw his own conclusions. To Todd, it might seem like a minor blip early in a new relationship, but for viewers who see Theo's actions from a broader lens, it's a troubling sign of what's potentially ahead. "I think it's much more interesting if part of Todd enjoys the attention from James and maybe even returns the flirtation a little," Gareth admitted. At that point in the relationship with Theo, there's perhaps a part of Todd that sees an easier road with someone like James. "But I don't think he'd act on it. He draws the line, but it adds more texture to the story. Todd has a history of questionable decisions and less than likable tendencies, so it's important to keep those dimensions in play." Looking ahead, Gareth shared insight into where things might be heading. "We're starting to see some troubling anger issues with Theo. There have been some moments that really shook Todd," he said. "But because Todd knows Theo's history with conversion therapy, he's perhaps a bit more patient, wanting to help him adjust to his identity. He wants to be supportive. Todd's encouraging Theo to embrace who he is after hiding it for so long. He's picking up on the warning signs, but love is pushing him to believe they can weather the storm. Viewers are probably noticing possessiveness and control that Todd is either missing or refusing to acknowledge." Gareth also pointed out that a future dilemma for Todd will be distinguishing what behaviors are unacceptable from those that are a result of Theo's past. That's going to complicate things. Todd understands where Theo's trauma and internalized homophobia come from, but that doesn't make it okay to excuse damaging behavior in the relationship. This will be Todd's toughest challenge, figuring out how to guide the relationship to a healthier place. As the plot thickens, Gareth also confirmed that Todd's friendship with George will continue to develop. What's lovely is that their bond remains strong, even without Eileen around. "George has stepped in as a kind of father figure Todd never had," he said. "I think George still has faith in Todd. He sees himself in him a little and wants to believe in his better side." There was a scene earlier this week where Todd opened up emotionally. He doesn't usually do that. He hides behind sarcasm and snark, but in that moment he was raw and vulnerable, which says a lot about where he is right now. Coronation Street airs on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 p.m. on ITV1 and streams on ITVX.